Hey everyone, welcome back. If you're deep in UPSC prep, you know how crucial it is to keep up with global happenings. I mean, it's not just for mains, it shapes how you see things even for prelims, right?
Absolutely.
So today we're taking a deep dive into something really relevant. It's going down in the US, some big changes with their student visa policies, and it's all tied up with these campus protests and the whole debate about anti-Semitism. We've got news reports, policy analyses, the works.
Yeah, we're going to get past those headlines and really dig into what these policy changes actually mean. We're talking about legal arguments, what it means for international students, especially Indian students, how universities and civil society are reacting. It's layered, and it could have a huge impact going forward.
Okay, so the core issue here is the U.S. government is getting a lot stricter about who gets a student visa. We even heard U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio flat out say, having a student visa, it's a privilege, not a right. That's a pretty strong statement.
It is. It really shows a different way of thinking about things. You can tell they're putting more emphasis on how international students behave while they're in the U.S., especially when it comes to politics. Our sources point to the Trump administration zeroing in on people suspected of taking part in campus protests, and even those who seem to generally support human rights in Gaza. That direct connection between your visa and what you say on campus, that's something we need to understand.
So legally speaking, this isn't totally out of the blue, right? It's based on existing laws. Could you explain that a bit?
Sure. The big one here is the U.S. Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. It gives the Secretary of State the power to revoke a visa if they think a foreign national is a threat to public order or national interests. Now, what's really interesting is how they're interpreting that pretty broad clause in this situation. The reasons they're giving for taking away visas recently all have to do with campus disruptions and being involved in organized protest movements, particularly ones they call anti-Semitic.
So it's not just about breaking the law in the usual sense. It's about taking part in protests that the government sees as going too far,
Right.
which also means they're going to be checking new visa applications way more closely now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The sources show they're scrutinizing new applications like crazy for all those F visas, academic ones, J visas for exchanges, M visas, the vocational kind. They're trying to spot anyone with ties to protest movements they don't like, especially anything related to anti-Semitism. And they want to do this before these students even get to the U.S.
It's like they're trying to get ahead of it.
Exactly. This proactive screening is a big deal in how this policy is changing.
Then there's this thing called catch and revoke. It sounds pretty intense. What's the idea behind it?
So catch and revoke really took off during Trump's second term. Basically, they find international students already in the U.S. who are involved in protests they see as a problem, and then they revoke their visas. And the numbers are pretty telling. Over 300 student visas were reportedly revoked by March 27th. This is really important for anyone listening who's prepping for UPSC. Indian students are reportedly being affected by this program too.
That's a big deal for our listeners. And catch and revoke isn't happening in a vacuum, right?
Not at all.
It seems connected to other policy goals.
For sure. It's all in line with that executive order from January. What about fighting anti-Semitism on college campuses? The administration is making a clear link between some kinds of protests and anti-Semitism, and that's what they're using to justify taking away visas. And there's something else, too, that our sources point out. It's kind of worrisome. Apparently, some of these visa revocations are based on AI-assisted reviews of students' social media activity.
Wait, AI going through social media to decide about visas? That's a whole other can of worms, right? Talk about surveillance and privacy. And what about mistakes? AI isn't perfect.
Exactly. There are so many questions there. And it's not just the students who are feeling the pressure. The universities themselves are getting squeezed too, right?
Yeah, the Trump administration is definitely putting the squeeze on universities they see as too tolerant of these protests. They're even going as far as cutting federal funding to some big-name schools like Columbia, UPenn, and Johns Hopkins. That's a pretty clear message, almost a threat. They're saying they'll take action against universities that don't push back against these movements.
Yeah, they're not messing around.
Brr.
It puts those universities in a really tough spot. They've got to walk this line between supporting free speech on campus and risking losing a ton of money.
This whole situation is a big shift for international education in the U.S. To really understand how big, we need to look at the history of international students in U.S. colleges.
Yeah, let's zoom out a bit. Historically, the U.S. has been the place to go for students from all over the world, and the numbers prove it. The Migration Policy Institute says international student enrollment in U.S. colleges has exploded. It went from just 26,000 back in 1949-50 to almost 1.1 million in 2019-20.
Wow.
That's huge. And their share of the total higher education enrollment went from a tiny 1% to almost 6% in the same period. It shows you how important international students have become for U.S. colleges.
With that kind of growth, they must have had to change some policies along the way, especially after something as big as 9/11, right?
Oh yeah, after 9/11, things really changed. When they found out one of the hijackers came to the U.S. on a student visa but never went to class, well, that made everyone think a lot harder about security and student visas. And that's how we got the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, SEVIS.
SEVIS changed how they keep track of international students. Can you explain how it works?
So SEVIS is this big central database. It keeps tabs on every foreign student and exchange visitor. Schools have to send in detailed student info all the time. Are they enrolled? What are they studying? Anything changing with their situation.
So they can really keep an eye on everyone.
Exactly. And SEVIS gives the U.S. government the tools to find students who might not be following their visa rules, makes it easier to revoke visas and even deport people who aren't staying enrolled or are breaking other visa rules.
Right.
So they've had this system to get a lot stricter for a while now.
And now we're seeing them actually use it. More and more universities are reporting that their students are having visas revoked.
Right. Our sources say the list of affected schools keeps growing. It started with places like Columbia and UPenn, but now we're hearing about it at Arizona State University, Georgetown University, the University of Minnesota, Cornell University, and who knows how many others. It seems like they're cracking down all over the place.
This has to be causing some serious concern. People are worried about their rights and freedoms, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest problems is that foreign nationals don't have as many legal options as U.S. citizens when they're facing these kinds of actions. Visa holders, they don't have the same constitutional protections. That makes it harder for them to fight back if their visa is revoked. And civil rights groups like the ACLU are really worried about this.
What's the ACLU's take on all of this?
They're urging universities to stand up to the federal government, to resist this government surveillance and what they see as threats against international students and faculty. Their main point is that protesting on campus is protected free speech. It's covered by the First Amendment. And they're saying these students should be able to do that without worrying about getting kicked out of the country.
It's this clash between national security, which is what government's talking about, and free speech and academic freedom.
Right.
And it's not just civil liberties groups who are speaking up, is it?
No, definitely not. The academic community itself is pushing back, too. Groups like the American Association of University Professors and the Middle East Studies Association, they're reportedly suing the Trump administration.
Wow.
Their argument is that going after students for their political views, that's not only possibly unconstitutional, it also goes against academic freedom and the idea that universities should be independent. They see these policies as a direct attack on the core values of higher education.
So we've got these legal challenges happening. But what's going to happen? Is there anything that tells us how these lawsuits will turn out?
That's the million-dollar question. Our sources say it's really uncertain legally. Even with all this opposition from civil rights and academic groups, some experts think this visa policy might stick around, at least for now, unless the courts side with the challengers. Governments have a lot of power when it comes to immigration, and trying to overturn these kinds of policies through the courts, it can be really tough and take forever.
Okay, so to recap for our listeners who are studying for their UPSC exams, the U.S. government is getting a lot stricter about student visas, especially with all the activism happening on campuses. They're using immigration law to justify it, saying it's about public order and national interests. And we're already seeing the effects on international students, including those from India. Visa applications are being scrutinized more, and there's this catch and revoke program.
Right.
And this whole thing has sparked a huge debate. Civil rights organizations and academic groups are fighting back, saying these policies might be violating basic rights like free speech and academic freedom.
Exactly. And for all of you UPSC aspirants out there, think about what this means for India. How could this shift in U.S. education policy affect India's own universities? Might we see more Indian students choosing to stay in India for college? And if so, what will that do to the capacity and quality of Indian universities? And think even bigger. How might this change international academic exchange around the world? What about free speech on campuses globally? These are big questions to think about as you analyze all of this.
Definitely some important things to consider, especially for those of you prepping for exams. We hope this deep dive helped you understand these big developments better. If you found it useful and you want to hear more about important topics like this, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment with any questions you have.
And if you want to go deeper and read the original reports we talked about, you can find them in the Hindu.